Can indeed, Andy.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Minister, for your update on this important programme. I'll try to keep my questions succinct as I know there are other members who want to come in. Minister, can I take you back to the 10th of May 2021 at question time? And if you recall, in response to my colleague Mike Nesbitt, you advised that you wanted to take the proposals on the way forward to spend this money to the Executive in the coming weeks. Can I ask, and I know you've referenced the club survey to the chair, but at no point during that question time did you advise members in the committee that you needed to conduct a further club survey. So when did it become apparent that the coming weeks was not going to be achievable?
Well, I think in terms of, it was clear then, because the programme was going to be changing, Andy, that more analysis and consideration needed to be done at that point. So, I mean, obviously question time, my answers are at a point in time of where I would have hoped to have taken the programme. More analysis needed to be done. And because the programme, as I said, had changed, that meant that I would need to take that back to the executive. And obviously that change was reflective of what was coming back from the clubs themselves. And it was important then that that was reflected in terms of the needs of the sport here and now, not back in 2016 or 2011. So that's where we were. Obviously, I was presented with some of that analysis in June, as officials have previously advised the committee. That had to be analysed. I had to look at what a new programme would look like going forward. And of course, we had to continue to work with clubs because costs were continuing to change and the needs of the clubs. So we were continuing and have been continuing to stay close with them, to analyse, looking at the costs. But then to bring, I had always said that this programme would come forward before the end of the mandate. And that's something that I was ready to do this year, was to bring that forward. And indeed, I have the programme ready. That if there is a functioning executive, that I can present this to them right away.
No, absolutely. And Minister, I appreciate that. And I appreciate, obviously, there was a major piece of work that had to be done around the refresh and re-engagement exercise. But perhaps, I'm struggling to get my head around this. The officials clearly advised committee when they came before us that all of the information in terms of deciding the way forward was presented to yourself in June. I don't understand why it took so long. And I also don't understand why in August and September then you were also advising members in the chamber that coming weeks again was back on the horizon. I don't see any justifiable reason as to why the coming weeks weren't achieved, Minister. And that's not me trying to be party political here. That is just how I'm reading it.
Well, because more analysis needed to be done, the programme was being changed, and obviously that has implications in terms of changing what the programme would have looked like back in 2011 to what it looks like now. We needed to continue the engagement with the clubs and obviously with the working group, and that work had continued. We were also hit again then, Andy, with the pandemic and closures that were coming into the autumn as well, and obviously trying to get money out to the sport in terms of stabilising them around those additional programmes coming up over the winter months also. But the thing is, I have a programme ready. If there's a functioning executive, I can bring that programme to the executive in terms of sign-off, and in the absence of that, I'm trying to do all that I can do through engaging with other ministers that are still in post and also seeking the legal advice to see how we can push this forward.
Okay, no, I appreciate that, Minister. So just for me to recap, in May it was coming weeks, in August it was coming weeks, September it was coming weeks. That wasn't achieved. What was the substantive pieces of work that needed to be done that pushed those coming weeks on? Because as I see here, refresh and re-engagement officials advised as that was completed end of June. My understanding from what the officials advised us was that that was everything. That furnished you with all of the material and information you required, Minister, to make the decision. So what did you ask officials to go back and get? Can you help us understand that?
Yeah, well, the programme was going to be changing, so therefore I had to take time, because this is a sizable programme, in terms of analysing the proposals from the refresh and engagement exercise. That meant that there's going to be new proposals coming forward, and I just needed to make sure and to satisfy myself that those proposals continued to meet the current need, but also the future need of the sport, taking into account the impacts of the pandemic, the financial viability of clubs as well, and sustainability going forward. And of course, importantly, that wider community impact that I talked about earlier, because this programme, not just in terms of the physical capital stadia upgrade, it is to look at that wider impact in terms of, for example, girls in sport, to look at communities and areas of deprivation as well, and the role that clubs and sport can play going forward. So all of that needed a bit of time in terms of considering it. Obviously, considering bringing a refreshed and changed programme, because that will come obviously, with people looking at that as well in terms of a new programme meeting the needs. And that just took a bit of time to analyse and then to craft a programme that I felt was ready to go to the executive, which I do now have, and we're ready to put that to the executive as soon as it's established.
Okay, so in terms of the information that you were given at the end of June, Minister, as per what we were advised by your official, would you accept that you were in receipt of everything you needed to make your decision at that point then?
No, well, the thing is, Andy, I have a programme ready now. The programme is ready to go. I have written to all executive ministers who are still in post. As I say, I'm still 2 ministers outstanding who have not responded, and obviously I would encourage them to respond. I'm trying to look at legal options in terms of progressing this programme. And again, obviously, I will look to the support of the committee in trying to get that over the line as well. So I'll continue to keep you engaged. But the programme is now ready. There was analysis and additional information that was needed towards the end of last year. I'd always, as I said, give a commitment that I wanted this programme progressed before the end of the mandate. We're now in a position with no executive, and I'm trying to do everything that I can to work around that. And I'm continuing to engage NIFL and the IFA as we progress going forward. So I do have a programme ready. If I have a functioning executive, as I say, I could present this programme this afternoon or this morning in terms of getting it progressed. And I think that's where the focus needs to be as to how we get this progressed with the difficulty of no functioning executive.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Minister, and I'm committed to seeing this programme delivered as are you and other parties. But what I want to better understand, Minister, is, and you haven't answered my question, is officials advised us as a committee that they felt that they had furnished you with all information necessary to make your decision at the end of June. You're now advising that you weren't in a position to make the decision. So what further information was being garnered at that point? What were you asking officials to go back to clubs with? Because as I understand it now, you were in a position, you had all the information at the end of June, but it took the best part of 8 months before a decision was achieved or reached.
Well, there was more analysis in terms of the ongoing needs of clubs, and those conversations actually are still continuing. We were hit with a period where raising costs in terms of the impact that that would have on the programme, because that would have an impact on the amount of clubs or the level of support that they could get. So there needed to be more analysis done around that. And also further information around the impact of the pandemic, because as I said, we hit another bump going into the autumn period where sport had to stop again. There was a knock-on effect and impact of the sport, and I wanted to make sure that I analysed all of that and looking at making sure the funding going forward would meet the needs of the sport, taking into account the impact of a global pandemic and what that had. So that took time, and we now have all of that analysis done. We're ready to go. That's notwithstanding the issue of costs is still there, and we're continuing to work. And that's why to that end, I have engaged the Minister of Finance, who has responded positively to me in terms of looking at additional resources. But again, it comes back to the point that we need a functioning executive to sign off on that. And I'm trying to look to see what I can do legally to push this ahead in the absence of that executive.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Minister. And I don't want to labour this point, but I think it's an important point. Officials advised us they furnished you with all the information back at the end of June 2021. They didn't caveat that, Minister, and say, yes, but Andy, Minister then asked us and tasked us to go away again and look at this. So you'll appreciate where I'm coming from, Minister. I have a answer to a question that said Minister was given everything at the end of June. So what I'm now looking at is that it took yourself, Minister, the best part of 8 months to get round to looking at all that information and deciding the way forward. I just believe that's a very long time. I've never been a minister, so I don't know how long these things take, but I would envisage it shouldn't have taken 8 months, but that's just my viewpoint. Now, Minister, can I bring you back to the legal advice? And you're advising that you're waiting on a further piece of legal advice. When do you expect to receive that?
Well, I'm hoping as soon as possible. I've obviously been pushing for it because of the current situation that we're in, Andy. The two pieces of legal advice that I have had until now is saying because of the cross-cutting nature, because of the change in the programme, that does need executive sign-off. So I'm going back to see what I can do. As I say, I've also written to other executive ministers to work with me and trying to find a way that we can progress this programme without delay. And obviously I'm continuing to work with NIFL and the IFA in that regard as well. So I am hopeful in the coming days. I mean, I can't give a definitive thing at the minute, but I am hoping soon that I can get that legal advice. I'm pressing for the additional information to come forward. But the two pieces of advice I have up until now does say that these issues need to be addressed at an executive.
Yeah, and you've been very clear in your answers, Minister. So I'm struggling to see what you're asking the legal advice to provide for you to look at a workaround. Can you better help us understand that? Because you've been clear in many of your answers. An executive is required for sign off. It's a cross-cutting decision, which it requires executive approval. So it's clear to me, Minister, you're saying that you can't progress this programme. So what are you looking for from the legal advice that you're waiting on?
Well, I think it's to look at the clarity in terms of, I suppose, can I work with other ministers that are still in post? Is there a workaround there? And that's why I have written to other ministers for them to work with me and supporting to get this programme progressed as soon as possible. There were a few issues of clarity in terms of the legal advice. We're looking at a potential workaround, and I need the support of other ministers to do that. So I'm just waiting on the legal advice to identify whether we can approach it that way or whether it's clear that we do need an actual executive with all ministers in post, including the First Ministers. And that's the last bit of information that I need from the legal advice. So as I say, I can't, because I'm not given the legal advice, so I can't give you a definitive time, but I'm obviously pushing for that to be done as soon as possible. And then obviously the workaround is to see, are there elements of this programme that we can continue to progress even in the absence of that? But as I say, if we had a functioning executive, this could all be done today.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Minister. And again, back to, we've all engaged with many clubs, and the views of the clubs out there on the ground is that this programme should have been delivered many years ago. Unfortunately, we had a period where a party decided to walk away from the Assembly for 3 years, which contributed to the undelivery of, or the inability to deliver this programme. It should have been delivered many years ago. So, Minister, I have asked on several occasions, I'm looking to ascertain, this programme has obviously been trundling along in the background, and there's important pieces of work that had to be carried out. But I'm trying to ascertain how much the department, including the previous decal department, have spent to date on this programme. On two separate occasions on written questions, I don't know whether intentionally or through misinterpretation of what I'm trying to achieve. I don't believe the latter to be the case. The question has been sidestepped. So, Minister, can you advise here today how much the Department for Communities, including the former decal department, has spent on the Sub-Regional Stadia Programme, all of the consultations, all of the administration up to now, before even one penny has gone out to any club?
I wouldn't have that figure, Andy, in front of me. I would have to come back to you with regards to that, and particularly I wouldn't have the decal figure, to be honest, either. But I suppose from my point of view, the money that has been ring-fenced, the 36.2 million, that money in its entirety would be going out in terms of the clubs. And obviously we're trying to get more money secured because of the inflationary increases and all of that. So I would be committed that the money and the figure that we had agreed as a flagship programme, that money would be going out the impact on the sport. But I don't have a specific figure in terms of money spent to date. I would have to come back to you on that.
Yeah, totally. And I think the reason I'm asking this piece is it's part of that good government piece. It's imperative upon all of us as politicians that we're delivering programmes and projects in a timely and effective manner. So I want to better understand, how much has been spent in this and how much could have actually been allocated and gone out in the ground. I welcome the commitment to 36.2 million as a minimum. Obviously, there needs to be a wider work or a conversation on increasing that, but 36.2 million will eventually be going out in the ground. I would like to see that this mandate. From what you said, Minister, I don't see that being the case, unfortunately, but I await you coming back to us with the detail. Thanks, Chair.